Days after a pregnant woman was killed in the Norwood neighborhood, her loved ones are preparing to say goodbye. Justina Wallace was shot last Friday. She died the next day. Only on WVTM 13, Gladys Batista spoke to her sister about the circumstances the family says will stay with her children forever.
On July 7th, 2023, a confrontation between two women in Birmingham, Alabama, ended in a fatal shooting that would later result in a capital murder charge. The incident occurred in the Norwood neighborhood during an argument involving 36-year-old Justina Wallace and 21-year-old Annayia Nen. Both women were connected through a shared personal relationship, a detail investigators would later confirm as central to the dispute. When police arrived at the scene, Wallace had been shot and was transported to a local hospital, where she and her unborn child were pronounced dead.
Justina Wallace was gunned down in this apartment complex off of 17th Avenue North last Friday. And I spoke to her sister today, nearly 1 week after her death, and she tells me she still can't believe that her sister is gone. Shamari Cook describes her sister as a doting mother whose energy was infectious. That's why she's still shocked after learning Wallace had been shot at her Norwood apartment complex. Cook says her sister was holding her toddler when it happened. Two of her other children were next to her. Birmingham police say Wallace was rushed to the hospital as detectives took 21-year-old Annayia Nen into questioning. Investigators say Wallace and Nen were arguing before the gunfire erupted, and the two women have children by the same man. Wallace died from her injuries on Saturday, and Nen is now charged with capital murder. Cook says it was difficult learning she lost her sister and her unborn baby, but described the trauma Wallace's children who saw it happen are now dealing with.
Several children were present during the incident, a factor that significantly shaped the charges filed in the case. While an arrest was made at the scene, many aspects surrounding the events leading up to the shooting, the actions of those involved, and whether the violence could have been prevented remain unclear. This case raises questions that extend beyond the crime itself. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Justina Wallace was a 36-year-old woman living in Birmingham, Alabama at the time of her death. She was a mother of 5 children and was pregnant with her 6th. Wallace resided in the Norwood area, where she lived with her children and managed the daily responsibilities of a large household. Her role within her family was central, as she was a primary caregiver and decision-maker for her children's routines, education, and basic needs. Wallace's early life was shaped by family responsibilities from a young age. Those who knew her describe her as accustomed to managing multiple obligations at once. She developed a reputation for being direct, organized, and focused on maintaining structure in her household. By adulthood, Wallace had settled into a routine centered largely around parenting, education, and planning for long-term stability. As a mother of 5, Wallace's daily life followed a consistent pattern. Her days involved preparing meals, coordinating school schedules, managing transportation, attending appointments, and supervising her children's activities. Much of her time was dedicated to maintaining order within the household. Her pregnancy added additional responsibilities, including medical appointments and physical limitations that required further planning and adjustment to her routine. At the time of her death, Wallace was in the later stages of pregnancy. The pregnancy was known to her family and friends, and she had reportedly been preparing for the arrival of another child. This included discussions about space, finances, and adjustments to her already demanding schedule. The pregnancy increased both her workload and the pressure she faced on a daily basis. Wallace had educational goals that extended beyond her immediate circumstances. She had expressed interest in furthering her education and had taken steps toward pursuing coursework related to business and entrepreneurship. Education was viewed by Wallace as a means of improving financial stability and providing long-term opportunities for her children. Her aspirations were structured around creating a more secure future rather than short-term gains. In terms of career ambitions, Wallace had plans centered on business ownership. She reportedly expressed interest in opening a boutique or pursuing independent work that would allow her flexibility while maintaining income. These ambitions reflected a desire to control her schedule while continuing to meet the demands of motherhood. While these plans were still in development, they played a role in how she viewed her future and personal progress. Wallace's relationship history was complex and relevant to the events that would later unfold. She had children with more than one partner, including the man who would later connect her to Annayia Nen. While the relationship with this individual had ended, the shared responsibility of parenting created ongoing contact. This connection, though no longer romantic, remained active due to childcare arrangements and communication needs. Among friends and family, Wallace was generally regarded as dependable and assertive. She was seen as someone who managed her responsibilities without outside assistance and who addressed issues directly when they arose. Her reputation within the community was that of a woman focused primarily on her children and household. However, managing multiple roles also placed her under continuous pressure. Before the incident, Wallace's life showed signs of both stability and strain. On one hand, she maintained a functioning household, pursued education, and planned for future business endeavors. On the other hand, financial responsibilities, childcare demands, pregnancy, and unresolved relationship tensions created ongoing stress. These factors existed simultaneously and formed the backdrop against which later events occurred. Wallace's household consisted primarily of herself and her 5 children. The children depended on her for daily care, emotional support, and structure. Their ages varied, with at least one child being a toddler at the time of the incident. This age range required Wallace to balance different levels of supervision, education, and attention throughout the day. Financially, Wallace carried significant responsibility. Supporting a household of 5 children while preparing for a 6th required careful budgeting and planning. Expenses included housing, food, clothing, medical care, and school-related costs. While Wallace sought opportunities to improve her financial situation, these pressures were ongoing and persistent. Romantic relationships played a limited but significant role in Wallace's life at this stage. Her prior relationship with the father of some of her children had ended, but the shared responsibility of parenting kept them connected. This ongoing connection introduced complications, particularly when the same individual became involved with another woman. The shared connection between Wallace and Annayia Nen stemmed from this man, who had children with both women. This link created overlapping family dynamics that were not easily separated. Communication regarding children, boundaries, and responsibilities became sources of tension. Over time, tensions appear to develop around this shared connection. Disagreements reportedly emerged regarding parenting roles, personal boundaries, and perceived interference. While not all details of these disputes were publicly documented, it was clear that unresolved issues existed prior to the confrontation. There were indications of prior disagreements and confrontations, though the extent and frequency of these incidents remain unclear. What is evident is that the relationship between Wallace and Nen was not neutral and had been influenced by ongoing personal conflict tied to the same partner. Annayia Nen was 21 years old at the time of the incident. She was significantly younger than Wallace and was also connected to the same male partner. Nen's background included her own experiences with early adulthood responsibilities, including motherhood. Nen's personal history suggests she was navigating multiple transitions at once. As a young adult, she faced challenges related to relationships, parenting, and personal identity. These factors placed her in situations that required emotional regulation and decision-making under stress. Her relationship to the shared male partner was central to the conflict. Like Wallace, Nen had a child with him, creating a permanent connection. This overlap placed the 2 women in direct proximity to each other's lives, despite their differences in age and life stage. Nen also carried motherhood responsibilities, though on a smaller scale than Wallace. Balancing parenting with personal relationships and external pressures contributed to her overall environment. Her lifestyle reflected the instability often associated with early adulthood and unresolved interpersonal conflict. Socially, Nowden's environment included peers, family members, and online interactions that influenced her behavior. Communication through digital platforms reportedly played a role in escalating tensions prior to the incident. There were indications of prior conflicts between Nowden and Wallace. While the full scope of these interactions remains unclear, acquaintances suggested that confrontations were not entirely unexpected. Behavioral patterns described included impulsivity, defensiveness, and difficulty disengaging from conflict. In the period leading up to July 7, 2023, Nowden faced situational pressures related to relationships, perceived threats to personal status, and unresolved disputes. These pressures, combined with access to a firearm, formed the immediate context preceding the confrontation. At the center of the conflict between Justina Wallace and Annayia Nen was a single shared connection: the father of their children. While his name has not been publicly emphasized in official reporting, his role is critical to understanding how two separate lives became intertwined and ultimately collided. Both women had children with the same man, establishing a long-term personal link that extended beyond casual acquaintance. Wallace, the older of the two, had been connected to him for years and shared multiple children with him. Nowden, significantly younger, also had a child with the same man, placing her within an already complex family dynamic. His role in each woman's life differed in duration and stability. Wallace's relationship with him was long-standing, rooted in shared parenting responsibilities and repeated interactions over time. Their connection required ongoing communication related to childcare, logistics, and finances. Nowden's relationship, while involving a child as well, appeared to be newer and less structured, but it still created a permanent tie between all parties involved. The overlapping nature of these relationships created unavoidable points of friction. Both women were connected not only through the man, but through the responsibilities and expectations that come with shared parenthood. This overlap meant repeated exposure to one another's presence, either directly or indirectly, through conversations, social media posts, or shared acquaintances. Disputes involving the man were reported prior to the incident, though the specifics were not fully documented in public records. What is known is that disagreements related to boundaries, respect, and communication had surfaced. These disputes did not occur in isolation. They were part of a broader pattern of tension that developed as personal lives intersected without clear separation. Communication between the three individuals occurred through multiple channels. Direct conversations took place in person and by phone, particularly concerning the children. Indirect communication also occurred through social media, where posts and messages sometimes reference conflicts without naming individuals directly. These digital interactions allowed misunderstandings to escalate without immediate resolution. On the day of the incident, the man's physical presence became a key factor. He was at or near the location where the confrontation occurred, though his exact movements varied according to witness accounts. His presence contributed to the decision by both women to be in the same place at the same time. After the shooting, he was detained briefly by police for questioning, but was not charged in connection with crime. Following the incident, his role shifted from participant in a dispute to a witness to its consequences. He became a source of information for investigators and a central figure in understanding how the confrontation unfolded. His actions after the incident included cooperating with law enforcement and addressing immediate concerns related to the children involved. The day of July 7, 2023, began without public indication of the violence that would later occur. From the morning through the afternoon, both women followed routines that were consistent with their daily responsibilities. Wallace spent the earlier part of the day caring for her children and attending to personal matters. She communicated intermittently with individuals close to her, including messages related to childcare and transportation. Nowden's movements earlier in the day involved similar responsibilities, including caring for her own child and maintaining contact with people within her social circle. Communications between the two women prior to the confrontation were indirect but increasingly pointed. Messages exchanged through intermediaries and social media posts suggested rising tension. Some posts referenced disagreements, though no direct threats were publicly documented. These communications indicated unresolved conflict rather than a single isolated argument. Social media activity played a role in amplifying the dispute. Posts and shared content were interpreted as confrontational, even when names were not explicitly mentioned. This allowed speculation and assumptions to circulate, increasing pressure without providing clarity or resolution. As the day progressed, decisions were made that placed both women in the same location. The shared connection, the father of their children, was a central factor in this convergence. Arrangements involving visitation or conversation brought all parties into proximity. Neither woman arrived at the location by accident. Both were responding to circumstances tied to their shared relationship. Warning signs emerged in the form of heightened communication and rapid changes in plans. The tone of messages became more urgent, and the possibility of a face-to-face interaction became increasingly likely. Despite these indicators, no intervention occurred before the confrontation took place. The confrontation occurred outside an apartment complex in Birmingham's Norwood neighborhood. The physical setting included residential buildings, open walkways, and parked vehicles. The area was active, with residents and children present nearby. Multiple individuals were at the scene when the argument began. This included Wallace, Nen, the shared male connection, and several children. Some witnesses were residents of the complex, while others were passers-by. The argument reportedly began as a verbal exchange. Initial statements focused on personal grievances related to their shared connection. The conversation escalated as voices were raised and the disagreement moved beyond verbal boundaries. Witness accounts described a rapid exchange of words, though exact phrasing varied. The argument centered on respect, perceived slights, and unresolved issues connected to their shared relationship. The presence of children did not immediately halt the dispute. Children were present throughout the confrontation. Wallace was holding her young child at the time, while other children stood nearby. Their presence was later cited as a significant factor in the legal classification of the crime. As the argument intensified, the situation escalated quickly. The introduction of a firearm marked a decisive turning point. At some point during the confrontation, Nen produced a gun. Witnesses reported that the weapon appeared without warning during the argument. The moment the weapon was introduced, the dynamic of the situation changed immediately. What had been a verbal confrontation shifted into a life-threatening encounter within seconds. Shots were fired shortly afterward. Immediate reactions from those nearby included panic, movement away from the scene, and attempts to seek help. Some individuals called emergency services, while others focused on protecting the children present. Law enforcement and medical responders were notified almost immediately following the gunfire, marking the end of the confrontation and the beginning of the criminal investigation. On the evening of July 7, 2023, a confrontation between Justina Wallace and Annayia Nen escalated into a fatal shooting outside an apartment complex in Birmingham, Alabama. The interaction began as a verbal dispute and progressed rapidly. Witnesses reported raised voices and visible tension before a firearm was produced. The argument occurred in an open area of the complex, with multiple individuals present nearby, including several children. The sequence of events unfolded within minutes. During the argument, Nen retrieved a handgun. Wallace remained in close proximity and was holding her young child at the time. There were no physical barriers separating the two women. The distance between them was short, allowing for direct line of sight. According to investigators, the firearm was discharged multiple times. Reports indicate that more than one shot was fired, though the exact number was determined later through ballistic analysis. Wallace was positioned facing the shooter when the shots were fired. She was holding her toddler against her body, limiting her ability to move or shield herself. The child was not struck by gunfire. Wallace sustained gunshot wounds to her upper body. The injuries were immediately life-threatening and resulted in significant blood loss. After the shots were fired, individuals at the scene reacted by fleeing, shouting, and attempting to assist. Children were present in the immediate area, contributing to disorder and confusion. Some witnesses attempted to check on Wallace, while others contacted emergency services. The shooter remained at the scene and did not flee. Emergency calls were placed to 911 within moments of the gunfire. Dispatch records show that the incident was reported as a shooting involving a woman and children present. First responders were dispatched immediately, and police units arrived within minutes, followed shortly by emergency medical personnel. Upon arrival, officers observed Wallace lying injured and unresponsive, with visible gunshot wounds. The area was secured enough to allow medical responders access. Paramedics began emergency treatment at the scene, focusing on stabilizing Wallace and controlling bleeding. Due to the severity of her injuries and the fact that she was pregnant, the situation was treated as a medical emergency involving 2 lives. Wallace was transported by ambulance to a nearby hospital under emergency conditions. During transport, medical personnel continued life-saving measures, including monitoring vital signs and attempting resuscitation. Hospital staff were alerted in advance to prepare for critical trauma care. At the hospital, doctors attempted to save Wallace and her unborn child. Despite medical intervention, Wallace succumbed to her injuries. The unborn child also did not survive. The time of death was pronounced later that evening. Medical examiners later confirmed that the cause of death was gunshot wounds. Following the transport of Wallace, police secured the scene to preserve evidence. The immediate area was cordoned off using police tape. Officers restricted access to prevent contamination of physical evidence. The location of the shooting was documented through photographs and measurements. Investigators recovered the firearm believed to have been used in the shooting. The weapon was secured and logged into evidence. Ballistics testing was later conducted, confirmed that the recovered firearm matched shell casings found at the scene. Shell casings were collected and documented, providing information on the number of shots fired and the firearm used. Additional physical evidence included bloodstains, bullet trajectories, and personal items belonging to those involved. Officers conducted a preliminary reconstruction of the scene to determine positions and movements during the shooting. Witnesses who were present were identified and separated to avoid cross-contamination of statements. Officers took initial witness accounts at the scene, noting observations regarding the argument, the presence of children, and the moments leading up to the gunfire. These statements were later followed up with formal interviews. Individuals directly involved, including the shooter and the father of the children connected to both women, were detained separately for questioning. This was done to establish individual accounts and determine involvement. No additional suspects were identified. Police conducted an initial assessment and determined that the shooting stemmed from a personal dispute. The presence of children and the fatal outcome elevated the seriousness of the case. Annayia Nen was detained at the scene without incident. She was taken into custody immediately following the preliminary investigation. Officers confirmed her identity and involvement before transporting her for processing. Formal arrest procedures were completed, including fingerprinting, photographing, and documentation of the charge. Prosecutors charged Nen with capital murder. Under Alabama law, a murder can be classified as capital if it is committed in the presence of a child or results in the death of multiple victims, including an unborn child. The legal significance of children witnessing the act played a key role in the charge determination. Investigators confirmed that children were present and within sight during the shooting. This factor elevated the charge beyond standard homicide. Nen was booked into the county jail and held without bond due to the severity of the charge. A bond hearing was not immediately scheduled. Court records indicate that the capital murder charge carries a possibility of life imprisonment or the death penalty, depending on the outcome of trial proceedings. Following the arrest, the case was transferred to prosecutors for formal indictment and further legal action. The investigation remained active, with evidence analysis and witness interviews continuing after the arrest. Following the fatal shooting on July 7, 2023, the legal process moved quickly in its earliest stages. Law enforcement detained the suspect, 21-year-old Annayia Nen, at the scene. Within a short period, formal charges were filed, and the case entered the Alabama criminal court system. The seriousness of the allegations shaped every step that followed. Nen's first court appearance occurred shortly after her arrest. During this hearing, the charge of capital murder was formally presented. Under Alabama law, capital murder applies when a homicide occurs under specific aggravating circumstances, including when a crime is committed in the presence of children. Prosecutors argued that this condition was met due to multiple minors being at the scene at the time of the shooting. The judge reviewed the charge, confirmed the defendant's identity, and addressed the issue of bond. Given the severity of the offense and the statutory guidelines surrounding capital murder, bond was denied. The defendant was ordered held in county jail pending further proceedings. The court also scheduled future hearings to address preliminary matters and the progression of the case. The prosecution's theory centers on intent and escalation. According to investigators, the confrontation between the victim, Justina Wallace, and the defendant stemmed from an ongoing personal dispute connected to a shared partner. Prosecutors maintained that the encounter was not accidental and that the defendant knowingly introduced a firearm into a volatile situation. The state asserts that the defendant discharged a weapon during the argument, striking Wallace while she was holding her child. Prosecutors further argue that the presence of children heightened the severity of the crime, satisfying the legal criteria for capital murder. The unborn child's death, resulting from Wallace's fatal injuries, is presented as an additional consequence of the defendant's actions, reinforcing the seriousness of the charge. From the prosecution's perspective, the evidence demonstrates a direct line from confrontation to fatal outcome, with no intervening factor sufficient to mitigate responsibility. In early filings and court statements, the defense focused on preserving the defendant's rights and challenging assumptions about intent. Defense counsel emphasized that the case involves a rapidly unfolding confrontation rather than premeditated planning. They signaled an intention to scrutinize witness accounts, timelines, and the interpretation of events leading up to the shooting. The defense has also indicated that context will play a significant role in their strategy. This includes examining the nature of the dispute, the actions of all parties present, and whether the defendant perceived a threat at the time of the incident. While no full defense narrative has been presented at this stage, early arguments suggest an effort to contest the prosecution's characterization of the encounter as deliberate and malicious. As the case moves forward, several categories of evidence are expected to be central. Physical evidence includes a firearm recovered at the scene and ballistic analysis linking it to the fatal injury. Investigators are also expected to present forensic findings from the crime scene, including shell casings, trajectories, and location data. Digital evidence may play a significant role as well. This could include text messages, phone records, and social media activity that establish communication between the parties before the confrontation. Prosecutors may use this information to demonstrate escalating tension or prior knowledge of the meeting. Witness testimony is another key component. Statements from bystanders, responding officers, and individuals familiar with the relationship dynamics are expected to help reconstruct the sequence of events. Medical testimony regarding the cause of death of both Wallace and her unborn child will also be presented to establish the direct consequences of the shooting. If convicted of capital murder, the defendant faces the most severe penalties available under Alabama law. Capital murder convictions can result in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or, in some cases, the death penalty. Sentencing decisions depend on multiple factors, including jury findings, aggravating circumstances, and any mitigating evidence presented during trial. The court would also consider the impact of the crime on the victim's family, particularly the surviving children. While sentencing is a separate phase from determining guilt, the outcome of the trial will significantly influence the defendant's future and the legal closure of the case. Like many complex criminal cases, this one has involved procedural steps that extend the timeline. Motions filed by both the prosecution and defense may address evidence admissibility, witness credibility, or constitutional concerns. Requests for continuances, mental health evaluations, or additional discovery can delay trial dates. Each procedural development reflects the legal system's effort to ensure due process. While these steps may slow resolution, they are standard in cases involving severe charges and extensive evidence. In the immediate aftermath of Wallace's death, attention turned to the care of her 5 surviving children. Temporary custody arrangements were made through family members to ensure the children were placed in stable environments. Child welfare agencies monitor the transition to confirm that the children's basic needs were met. Although the legal system focuses on charges and evidence, the consequences for children extend beyond the courtroom. The children were present during or near the incident, exposing them to sudden violence and loss. Professionals acknowledge that such exposure can have lasting psychological effects, requiring counseling and long-term support. The children not only lost their mother, but also an unborn sibling, who did not survive the shooting. This compounded loss reshaped their family structure overnight. The absence of a primary caregiver introduced new challenges related to stability, routine, and identity. Long-term considerations include access to education, mental health resources, and consistent caregiving. The children must navigate life milestones without their mother's presence, while also living with the public nature of the case. These challenges extend far beyond the conclusion of legal proceedings. Extended family members have worked to maintain continuity in the children's lives. This includes keeping siblings together when possible, maintaining school routines, and shielding the children from unnecessary exposure to media coverage. These efforts aim to create a structured environment amid ongoing legal uncertainty. The killing prompted widespread attention within the local community. Residents expressed concern over the circumstances of the crime, particularly the involvement of children and the loss of multiple lives in a single incident. The case became a focal point in discussions about interpersonal conflict and public safety. Community members organized vigils and memorial gatherings to acknowledge the loss and support the surviving family. These events served as structured spaces for residents to address the impact of violence within their neighborhood. The incident sparked broader conversations about conflict resolution, relationship disputes, and the presence of firearms in domestic settings. Community leaders and organizations referenced the case in discussions aimed at prevention and awareness. Media coverage followed each major development, from the arrest to court hearings. Public scrutiny intensified as details emerged, placing pressure on the legal system to conduct a thorough and transparent process. The case continues to be monitored closely as it moves through the courts. Despite the arrest and charge in this case, several critical questions remain unresolved. These unanswered elements continue to shape public discussion and underscore the complexity of what occurred. One of the most significant questions is whether there was a prior history of threats or warnings. While investigators confirmed the two women knew each other and shared a personal connection to the same man, there has been limited public disclosure regarding earlier confrontations. It remains unclear whether threats were communicated verbally, through text messages, or on social media before the day of the shooting. No confirmed restraining orders or formal complaints have been publicly acknowledged, leaving uncertainty about whether escalating hostility had been documented. Another unresolved issue is whether intervention could have occurred earlier. In cases involving personal disputes tied to shared partners, warning signs often surface before violence occurs. These may include repeated arguments, social media confrontations, or involvement of third parties attempting to mediate. In this case, no official confirmation has been provided regarding prior police calls, mediation attempts, or requests for assistance. If early indicators were present but unaddressed, questions remain about missed opportunities for prevention. The role of social media also warrants examination. Reports suggest online activity may have contributed to escalating tensions, including messages or posts made before the confrontation. Social media platforms often amplify disputes by making private conflicts public and instantaneous. However, authorities have not released detailed findings regarding digital evidence, such as messages, videos, or posts that may have influenced the confrontation. The lack of transparency leaves uncertainty about how online exchanges shaped real-world actions. Accountability beyond the shooter is another area of concern. While criminal responsibility rests with the individual who fired the weapon, broader accountability is less clear. This includes the role of the shared partner, whose involvement connected the two women and may have contributed to the dispute. It also raises questions about whether bystanders, acquaintances, or family members were aware of escalating conflict and whether any warnings were ignored or minimized. Finally, there are gaps in investigation and public record. Limited information has been released regarding forensic timelines, witness statements, or digital evidence. While this may be due to an ongoing legal process, the absence of detail has left many aspects of the case unresolved in the public narrative. This case does not exist in isolation. It reflects broader patterns seen in domestic and interpersonal violence cases across the country. Disputes involving shared romantic partners have historically been a common source of conflict, particularly when unresolved emotional, financial, or parental responsibilities overlap. These situations can create prolonged tension, especially when communication is indirect or adversarial. In many cases, disputes intensify when boundaries are unclear and external stressors are present. Firearm accessibility plays a critical role in the escalation of personal conflicts. Arguments that might otherwise result in verbal confrontation or separation can become fatal when a firearm is present. The speed at which a disagreement can turn deadly increases significantly when weapons are readily available. This case highlights how access to a gun transformed a dispute into a homicide within moments. Patterns of violence involving family dynamics are also evident. The presence of children during the incident introduces another layer of complexity. Exposure to violence has long-term consequences, particularly when it occurs within familial or domestic settings. These patterns are often cyclical, affecting not only the immediate parties involved, but also future generations. The case also points to potential systemic failures and warning signs. These include limited intervention in personal disputes, lack of accessible conflict resolution resources, and insufficient monitoring of escalating situations involving known interpersonal tensions. While not every conflict results in violence, the absence of preventative mechanisms can leave individuals vulnerable. At present, the case remains within the judicial system. The accused faces a capital murder charge, reflecting the severity of the offense and the circumstances under which it occurred. The legal process includes pretrial hearings, evidence review, and preparation by both prosecution and defense. The case is currently awaiting trial or further resolution, with timelines dependent on court schedules, motions, and evidentiary proceedings. As with many high-profile cases, the length of the legal process may extend significantly, leaving families and communities in prolonged uncertainty. The ongoing impact on families involved is substantial. The victim's children must navigate life without their mother, while the accused family also faces long-term consequences tied to incarceration and legal proceedings. These impacts extend beyond the courtroom, affecting education, stability, and family structure. In this context, justice is not limited to a legal outcome. It also involves accountability, acknowledgement of harm, and clarity regarding what occurred. For some, justice may be defined by a conviction or sentence. For others, it may mean transparency, answers, and systemic change aimed at preventing similar incidents. The established facts of this case are clear. A confrontation between two women with a shared personal connection escalated into lethal violence. One woman lost her life. An unborn child did not survive. 5 children were left without their mother. A suspect was arrested and charged. These facts are not in dispute. The consequences cannot be undone. Legal proceedings may determine responsibility and punishment, but they cannot reverse the outcome of that day. The absence created by the loss of life is permanent, shaping the future of multiple families. The lasting absence left behind is measurable in practical terms. Empty bedrooms, altered custody arrangements, and disruptive routines. It is also evident in the broader impact on a community forced to confront another instance of preventable violence. This case continues to matter because it reflects larger issues: unresolved interpersonal conflict, access to deadly weapons, and gaps in early intervention. Until these issues are addressed, similar cases will continue to surface. The outcome of this case will contribute to ongoing conversations about accountability, prevention, and the limits of the justice system. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.